Today we're going to continue our conversation on taxonomy. Before we jump into new stuff, let's back up to Thursday and let's just kind of refresh and review what we learned about on Thursday. So for starters, what is taxonomy?
Taxonomy. I don't know.
Classification.
Okay, thank you. So it's just our way of classifying animals. You can think it's how we order them, we describe them. Okay, it includes naming animals. So last Thursday, do you remember learning about our classifications or like our taxons, our kingdom, like domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species? So today we're going to continue on with that. We're mainly going to talk about domains, just to give you a good idea of what the three domains are. So before we start notes, just a reminder, you only need to write the bold words. So you don't have to write every word, just the bold words, which are the big ideas. So today we're going to pick up with taxonomy and how it's a constantly changing field. And taxonomy can change for two reasons. So one, we maybe just find a new species that has to be identified and classified. Okay. So far, we have described and classified about 2 million species. And we think there's anywhere from 3 to 30 million, which means there's a lot of work still to be done. Okay, so that's one way that it's changing. Another way it's changing is if we find new information that contradicts what we previously thought. Okay, so for example, originally we thought crocodiles were more related to snakes and turtles. However, as we got new knowledge on like biochemical factors, think of like DNA or proteins, and we found new evidence in the fossils, we have changed our minds and we now think crocodiles are more closely related to birds than they are snakes and turtles. Okay.
Birds?
Birds.
How birds?
They would have more DNA resemblance, so their DNA is more closely related than it is compared to snakes or turtles. And also just like fossils, so looking at transitional fossils of how they evolved. So today we're going to focus on the domains. We'll talk a little bit about the kingdoms. Does anyone remember what we call one of these charts? Starts with a C.
Cladogram?
Good, it's a cladogram. Okay. So if you look at the cladogram, our three domains are bacteria, Archaea, and Eukarya. And then up here are our kingdoms. So Eubacteria is the kingdom in the domain bacteria. Archaea is the domain where Archaebacteria is the kingdom. And then there are 4 kingdoms that fit into the Eukarya domain. And those 4 kingdoms are Protista, Plantae, Fungi, and Animalia. Here's just another diagram. Again, just showing you our 3 big domains. So we have bacteria, we have Archaea, and then we have Eukarya, which is mainly our plants and our animals. So the first domain we're going to talk about are bacteria. So bacteria, we should be familiar with. Yes, we have some experiences with bacteria. Bacteria are diverse. They are found in all sorts of places. Some are helpful to us, some are harmful to us. The big idea that I want you to know about bacteria is that they're more abundant than any other organism. Okay. What does the word abundant mean? Okay, plentiful. So like if we were to count up how many bacteria exist, there are more of them than any other organism out there on our planet. And then bacteria, they are just a wide variety. Okay, so they can live in different places, they have different functions, they can get their energy from different ways. So autotrophic bacteria make their own food. Heterotrophic bacteria have to get their food from other organisms. All right, our second domain are Archaea. These ones are probably the least familiar to us, just because our experience with them is low. So Archaea, they're thought to be kind of similar to ancient bacteria, but they're also closely related to eukaryotic ancestors. And the reason that we don't have a lot of interaction with them is they live in extreme places. And so we call them extremophiles. And in the word extremophile, do you see the word extreme?
Yeah.
Okay, so that just means they live in extreme places. So that means they can live in like super, super hot places, like boiling hot springs. They can live in salty lakes, thermal vents on the ocean floor, and then like mud marshes where there's no oxygen. Okay, so yes, thermal vents. So they live in super extreme environments where we typically aren't around. Therefore, Archaea is something we're probably not all that familiar with. And our third domain is Eukarya. These all have cells with membrane-bound nuclei and organelles, meaning that they have to be made up of eukaryotic cells, which would be us. And so there's 4 kingdoms that fit into the category or the domain of Eukarya. Those 4 kingdoms are Protista, which are protists, think like amoebas, fungi, plantae, which are plants, and then animals. And then finally, I want to talk about an exception. So if you look at our 3 domains, something gets excluded, and that something is viruses. Okay, so viruses are an exception. And so if we look at what makes up a virus is just nucleic acid, so DNA or RNA, and then protein. So viruses, they don't have any cells, nor are they a cell. And then think back to the very, very beginning of the school year, like probably last August. We talked about 8 criteria that have to be met in order for something to be classified as living. Viruses don't meet that criteria. Therefore, we don't consider viruses to be alive. Since we don't consider them to be living, they don't fit into our taxonomy units of how we classify living things. And then finally, tomorrow and Wednesday, we're going to look at how can we identify species. And so to identify species, we use a dichotomous key. So these are just tools used to help you figure out what species, like your sample is. And I'll show you how to use dichotomous keys tomorrow, but you just basically go through a bunch of yes or no questions, and that'll lead you to your species. So let's say you're hiking, and you come across a plant, and then you get like a rash, and you're all itchy, and you don't know what the plant is, okay? I mean, maybe not. You might want to go to the doctor, but the doctor doesn't know what you have maybe interacted with. So this is where a dichotomous key would be helpful. So you would like have a field guidebook on you, and you just go through the questions, and it helps you narrow it down to your species. Another example could be, what if you're maybe hiking and you see some berries? Some berries are totally fine to eat, others no way. So you could use a dichotomous key again to help you figure out what species it is and figure out if it's safe to maybe eat, or do you want to leave it alone? A lot of people like to bird watch, so you could use it to identify birds. Fishers, how many people like to fish in here? Okay, any fish? Okay, if you're fishing in North Dakota, I've kind of gotten the vibe that people, you're pretty familiar with what kind of fish you catch here, but let's say you go to a place that you're not all that familiar with. You could use a dichotomous key to help you figure out what kind of fish you caught if you couldn't know just by looking at it.